Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Taylor Hayes walked into the most dangerous moment of her life with a steady voice and a choice that nobody, not Sheila, not the audience, and honestly, not even Taylor herself, could have fully predicted until the words were already in the air. What happened in that room wasn't just a confrontation, it was one of the most genuinely complex and emotionally devastating scenes this show has ever had the courage to put on screen. The bold and the beautiful has always known how to build to a breaking point. But what unfolded between Taylor Hayes and Sheila Carter this week transcended the mechanics of soap opera drama entirely and arrived somewhere far more uncomfortable and far more human. Sheila was armed. Sheila was desperate. Sheila was the version of herself that everyone in that family has always feared most. Not the cold strategist, not the patient schemer, but the raw, unraveling woman who has been pushed past every limit and has nothing left to protect herself with except a weapon and a lifetime of accumulated pain. And Taylor, the psychiatrist who has spent her entire career studying exactly this kind of human crisis, stood her ground and then did something so unexpected, so completely disarming, that it stopped Sheila cold. She forgave her out loud, directly, without condition, and it changed everything. The scene begins with two women and an impossible amount of history compressed into a single room. Taylor is near the window, posture rigid, but her eyes carrying something unusual for this situation, a quality that looks almost like peace. And if you know Taylor Hayes, you know that peace in the presence of Sheila Carter is not a natural state. Taylor has spent years watching these women terrorize the people she loves most. She has seen the damage Sheila leaves in her wake. She has professional training in the psychology of violence, suffering, and the complex emotional architecture of people who cause harm. And none of that training, none of the degrees, the clinical hours, the theoretical frameworks could have fully prepared her for standing in the same room as Sheila Carter in crisis. But there was something different about Taylor tonight. Something resolved as though she had made a decision before she even entered that space, and she was simply committed to seeing it through. Sheila, by contrast, was everything Taylor was not in that moment. She was a storm that had lost all internal coherence, breathing erratically, eyes moving around the room without settling anywhere, her grip on the weapon tightening and loosening in the specific, involuntary way of someone whose body is operating on pure adrenaline and desperation. And here is the thing that made this version of Sheila so much more frightening than the calculated villain we have watched scheme and manipulate across so many storylines. This was not strategy. This was not the Sheila who plans three moves ahead and stays calm because she's always in control of the exit. This was a woman who had been pushed to the absolute edge by the collision of love, rejection, and the overwhelming, suffocating need to belong somewhere, anywhere, and had arrived at the point where the weapon in her hand felt like the only thing that was still entirely hers. When Sheila finally spoke, her voice broke in a way that cut right through the performance of anger she was trying to maintain. She accused Taylor of never understanding her, of standing in the way of everything she ever wanted her son, her place in the family, her sense of being accepted, and there was something genuinely painful underneath those accusations, even through the fury and the pointed weapon, because the longing behind them was real even if everything she had done in pursuit of that longing was catastrophically wrong. I couldn't help feeling the weight of it, even knowing everything Sheila has done, because at the center of all that destruction has always been a person who desperately, pathetically, unbearably just wanted to belong. Taylor didn't react with fear. She didn't retreat. She moved closer, and honestly, I held my breath, watching it. That, speaking in a voice that was measured and calm and carried the specific authority of someone who has made complete peace with what they are about to say. She told Sheila plainly that she hasn't been standing in Sheila's path. She had been standing between Sheila and the devastation Sheila dragged with her everywhere she went, and she drew that distinction with a precision that was almost clinical. This wasn't about obstructing Sheila's right to exist. It was about protecting people from the specific, consistent destruction she caused. Sheila's response was the rage of someone who has been seen clearly and hates it. She challenged Taylor's sense of superiority, the degrees, the control voice, the seemingly perfect life. And underneath all that rage was the accusation that Taylor could never truly understand what it feels like to be perpetually rejected, to be perpetually alone. And Taylor's face did something extraordinary in that moment. It softened, not with fear, not with pity, but with something that looked genuinely like comprehension, like someone who had perhaps for the first time allowed herself to fully absorb the human reality of what Sheila's life had actually been. Separate from the harm, separate from the choices, just the raw experience of being that person. And then Taylor moved closer again, closer than anyone watching could understand or justify from a pure self preservation standpoint. And she said something that stopped the room completely. She told Sheila that if she pulled that trigger, she wouldn't just be ending Taylor's life. She would be proving to herself permanently and irrevocably that she was nothing more than the pain she carried, that she had no identity beyond her own suffering. I cannot overstate that those words did. You could see it land on Sheila's face, the way it traveled beneath the surface of all the defensive fury and found something buried far deeper, something she hadn't let anyone near in a very long time. Because Sheila's entire identity has been constructed around her suffering, around the narrative of herself as the perpetual outsider, the rejected one, the woman that everyone felt and feared in equal measure, and Taylor had just named that destruction directly and told her it was a choice, not a destiny. Sheila fought back with the most honest question she had asked all night. What then? Would anyone forgive her? Could she truly walk away from everything she had done? And Taylor's answer was the opposite of a reassurance. She told her no, redemption doesn't work that way. It doesn't arrive as overnight forgiveness. It is the daily exhausting, costly decision to become something different than what you have been, while still living with the consequences of everything that came before. That answer was harder and more respectful than comfort would have been, and Sheila felt the difference. Then came the moment, the two words that detonated everything in that room more completely than any weapon could have. Taylor looked directly into Sheila's eyes and said, I forgive you, not because it erases anything, not because it was deserved, but because she refused to allow Sheila's darkness to continue shaping her own life from the inside. And Sheila, who had been braced for anger, for fear, for accusation, for every response she had experienced navigating, had absolutely no defense against that. She stumbled backward, her voice went thin and uncertain. She accused Taylor of lying because her mind genuinely could not accommodate what she was hearing as real. Taylor pressed it further, and this was the piece that truly undid Sheila completely. She told her that her forgiveness was the very thing Sheila was frightened of, because if someone could genuinely forgive her, she could no longer hide behind her past as justification for everything she continued to do. The excuse was gone, and without the excuse, all that remained was the choice. The gun came down slowly, almost involuntarily, and when it finally hit the ground, the sound it made seemed to release something in that room that had been held under pressure for a very long time. Sheila fell into the nearest chair and finally, completely without strategy or performance, broke. The tears that came were not the calculated vulnerability she was weaponized before. They were real, raw, and terrifying in their honesty. And when she whispered that she didn't deserve this, Taylor said the most important thing in the entire episode. You are right, you don't. But that doesn't mean you can't choose what happens next. What Taylor achieved in that room goes far beyond a hostage situation resolved without physical harm. She performed under genuine duress, the most sophisticated possible intervention in the psychology of a person like Sheila Carter, and she did it by refusing to engage with Sheila's framework at all. Every villain needs an opponent who confirms the drama, who validates the narrative of persecution and injustice by fighting back on those terms. Taylor refused to be that opponent. She removed herself entirely from the binary Sheila had constructed, and doing so, removed the very foundation Sheila's behavior was built on. The arrival of authorities as the door burst open is the story's reminder that forgiveness and consequence are not the same thing, and crucially, Taylor never implied they were. Sheila's past remained intact and real. What changed was not her legal situation or the validity of the harm she had caused, What changed was the story she had been telling herself about why she was the way she was, and whether the story was permanent, the first fragile flicker of accountability that appeared in Sheila's eyes, not yet atonement, just the initial terrifying awareness that she might actually be capable of something different, is either the beginning of one of this show's most complex character journeys or simply the most honest moment Sheila Carter has ever had. Either way, it mattered. Here is my honest take, and I want to be careful about it because this scene deserves that care. Taylor's forgiveness was not naive. That is the thing I cannot stress enough. She did not stand in front of a woman holding a weapon and forgive her because she believed Sheila was secretly good, or because she thought the past could be undone, or because she had somehow minimized the reality of what Sheila has caused the people Taylor loves. She forgave her as an act of personal liberation, a deliberate choice to stop allowing Sheila's damage to define the boundaries of her own life. That is one of the hardest and most sophisticated emotional choices a human being can make. And watching Taylor make it calmly and completely under those specific circumstances was genuinely moving. What I think this scene does for Sheila's arc going forward depends entirely on whether the writing is willing to honor the complexity it just introduced, because the easy version of this story is Sheila's redemption arc, complete and relatively uncomplicated. The honest version is much harder. A woman who has been given the rarest possible gift, genuine forgiveness from someone she harmed, and still has to decide whether she is willing to pay the full cost of becoming someone worthy of it. That is not a quick or clean journey, and I hope this show is brave enough to walk it slowly. Taylor Hayes did something tonight that she may not have fully planned when she walked into that room. She didn't just disarm Sheila Carter physically, she disarmed the entire psychological structure Sheila had built her life around. And Sheila, for the first time in as long as anyone can remember, was left without a script, without a justification, without the familiar shelter of her own suffering, just a choice. So here is what I want to know from you. Do you believe Sheila Carter is actually capable of the kind of change that Taylor's forgiveness opened the door to, or has too much been done and to too many people for any version of real accountability or to feel credible? And was Taylor's forgiveness the bravest thing she has ever done, or did she put herself in danger that nobody needed her to take on? Tell me everything you are thinking in the comments because this scene is one I genuinely cannot stop turning over. If this breakdown resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who felt this episode as deeply as we did. And subscribe so you are right here as we watch whether Sheila Carter's first fragile spark of responsibility survives contact with the real world, because that is going to be the most interesting thing this show does all year.